You know that feeling, right? That specific, heavy mood that can just drop down on a Sunday afternoon. Well, today, we are going to tackle that universal gloom, but with a pretty unique approach. We're going to reverse engineer a solution by digging into a short story set in France and the very specific words it uses.
Just picture it. It's Sunday. You look out the window and it's not just raining, it's that drizzly, gray, relentless kind of rain that feels like it's washing all the color out of the world. All your plans? Yeah, they feel pretty much canceled. So what do? Well, this little story gives us a very specific blueprint for that exact feeling.
So our story kicks off with the main character, Sophie, feeling exactly this. But in French, there's a word for it that has so much more weight than just boredom. It's ennui. And this isn't about having nothing to do. No, it's more of an existential weariness, a kind of melancholy that's so recognized in French culture that it's almost poetic.
So, to really get a handle on this feeling of ennui, let's break down how the story builds this mood. We're going to zoom in on the opening scene in Bordeaux and look at 3 key French words that just perfectly capture the vibe.
Okay, so here's our setting, Bordeaux. And the weather? It is not just a backdrop here, it's practically a main character. The story describes this relentless gray drizzle that feels like it's literally trying to erase the city. What a powerful image, right? It perfectly mirrors that internal feeling of ennui. And what's the first thing Sophie does? She doesn't just stare out the window, she soupirs, she sighs. Now, the cultural context here is everything. For us, a sigh can mean you're annoyed or impatient, but in France, it's often more of a physical punctuation mark, a way to just release a feeling. It's a semantic release, and in this case, she's releasing all that ennui. And that sigh is directly connected to the weather, which brings us to our next keyword, grise, or gray. The world outside is gray, and so is Sophie's inner world. That connection, that link between the outside environment and the inside feeling, that is the foundation for this whole story. But here's the thing, Sophie doesn't just sit there in her gray, sighing state. Nope, she acts. And this is the pivot. This is the moment the whole story shifts from just passively feeling gloomy to actively seeking connection.
So what does she do? It's beautifully simple. She sends a message to her friend, Nathalie. And Nathalie comes back almost immediately with an idea, the art museum. And here's the crucial little detail. It's gratuit. It's free on the first Sunday of the month.
Now, this isn't just about saving a couple of bucks. This moment illustrates something so core to French culture, the democratization of culture. The whole idea is that art and history, they're not luxury products. They're public resources, like a park or a library. They belong to everyone. And making them free is a way to say, hey, come use this as part of your everyday life.
Okay, the plan is locked in, so let's follow them to the museum itself and see how this journey from the cold, wet street to the warm, quiet gallery becomes a kind of ritual.
First, they have to brave the weather, all bundled up in a manteau épais, a thick coat that's like their armor against the cold. The very first thing they do when they get inside is se réchauffer, to warm up. And then comes this really crucial move. They dépose their umbrellas. They literally shed the outside world. It's almost like a cleansing ritual that prepares them for what's inside.
And once they're inside, they find something amazing. The museum is not bondé or crowded. The very same gray rain that started this whole feeling of ennui has now given them a gift, a quiet, personal space. The tourists all stayed home, and this public institution has basically become their private sanctuary. So they're warm, they've ditched their wet coats, and they practically have the place to themselves. Now we get to the heart of the cure, how they actively use the art to change how they feel.
So they wander into the 18th century gallery, and Natalie points to this portrait of a really stern-looking guy in a powdered peruke, a wig. And her comment is so simple. He looks very serious. And yeah, you can see why.
But the most important part is Sophie's reaction. The story says she responds en riant, while laughing. She cracks a joke that he only looks so serious because he hates his wig. I love this. They're not being quiet, solemn observers. They are alive in this space. They're interacting with the art on their own terms, and they're breaking that formal museum silence with laughter.
And this lighthearted vibe just keeps going. In the next room, they find a landscape painting, and here is where the magic really happens. The world outside is grist and cold, right? But the world inside this painting is luminous. It's luminous and bright. Sophie even says it makes her wish for summer. The art is literally a window into the light and warmth that they're missing.
And then the pace slows down. Sophie stops in front of a marble sculpture of a woman who's reading a book. And the word she uses to describe the woman's face is the key to this whole journey. Paisible, peaceful. In this quiet, empty room, looking at this timeless image of calm, Sophie finds a mirror for the stillness that she has been looking for all day long.
Okay, so after feeding their souls, it's time to feed their bodies. They head to the museum cafe for the final act of this whole Sunday transformation. This is the reward of comfort.
Natalie just sums up the entire day perfectly. She says, outside it's raining and we are here warm. They did it. They successfully built this little bubble of warmth and comfort and friendship right up against the gray world. It was a deliberate, curated moment of just perfect contentment.
And think about the elements here. The verb tenir, to hold a warm cup, it grounds them in that physical feeling of warmth. They share a classic tarte aux pommes. And finally, they do this little act of celebration. They trinquer, they toast with their hot chocolates, which just elevates the simple cafe trip into a victory lap.
So what's the big takeaway from Sophie and Natalie's gloomy Sunday? It's all about how to build a world that the gray just can't touch. I mean, just look at the emotional journey. The day started with a suspir, a sigh that came straight from ennui. It ends in that cafe with a sourire, a smile of pure contentment. The story's loop is just so beautifully closed.
And this is maybe the most important part of all. The story is very clear. Outside, it is still January. It is still cold, and it is still gray. The weather never got better. The world didn't change for them. They changed their world for themselves. Agency, taking those small, deliberate actions, that is the true antidote to ennui.
Which really leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? We tend to think of French culture as this really high-minded thing, philosophy, fashion, complicated politics. But maybe, just maybe, the ultimate French skill is something way more practical. Just knowing the exact recipe of friend, museum, and pastry you need to fix a gray day. And maybe that's the most valuable kind of cultural knowledge there is.